Flashy girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast about The Nanny, a hit sitcom from the 90s starring Fran Drescher. I am Sean Pasquale here with...
Toria Sheffield.
That's right. And we are into season 5 of both our podcast and the show. Today we are talking about season 5, episode 1, The Morning After, written by Karen Lucas and directed by Dorothy Lyman. That starts with the very rare for The Nanny, Previously On. Toria, what is this episode about?
Well, first, before we even get into that, I just want to say when I created a new file for season 5, I got a thrill. I was like, oh my, I can't believe it. There's always a thrill at the beginning of a new season, when I organize stuff. So just putting it out there that I was like, a new season. But this episode takes place literally right after where we left Fran and Mr. Sheffield and everybody last season. It's, they're not doing it's not
a day or two. Right?
Yeah. It's not the summer has passed, right? It's Niles is very recently home from the hospital after his heart attack, and Fran and Mr. Sheffield, they got together, but it's literally we start with Mr. Sheffield in Niles's bedroom recounting what happened in that hospital bedroom. And it's juxtaposed with Fran in the living room with Val, and she's recounting what happened. So
it was very Summer Lovin' from Grease.
Yes, that's what I said. It was very Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta. But so we can assume that, the hospital makeout and we really need to seize the day moment happened so recently that Fran hasn't even decompressed and told it to Val yet until this moment. But basically the per usual, Mr. Sheffield, I wrote, he's pulling his same shit. He's pacing around Niles's room and he's like, I'm afraid that I left an impression with Miss Fine that, things are maybe moving faster than they really are. Oh, what should I do? And Niles is on an exercise bike because he's now, recovering from his heart attack and trying to get healthy. And he goes, well, you could tell her that you love her and then marry her. And Mr. Sheffield kind of looks at him blankly. And then he goes, or you could come up with some stupid ploy to distract her and maybe slow things down. I don't know, have her redecorate a room. And Mr. Sheffield's like, oh, yes, that one. That's the one I'll do. And then he runs out of the room.
I don't usually, I sometimes Elizabeth will watch these with me, sometimes she won't, but we watched them together last night, and when they did the Previously On, they were they show oh, this happened, and then they just cut to Mr. Sheffield going, Niles had a heart attack, and Elizabeth gasped. She went, oh!
I know! I gasped when we actually watched it.
And I had to go, no, it's okay, he's okay, he's fine. So it is very shocking to it's a shocking event for a sitcom to be this person had a heart attack. So I thought that was really cute, and then it was very cute to me, the summer loving, at one point Mr. Sheffield's I ravaged her, Niles, and then it cuts to Fran and she goes, he was gentle, like a little lamb.
Yes.
Which is so insulting. I just like the idea that Mr. Sheffield on ravage mode is gentle as a lamb.
Yes. And then he also, I think, makes note, he was I was absolutely lightheaded. And then she's basically he sat on a syringe of some sort of
Demerol
sedative. And so it explains why he was also feeling so dizzy.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
The other thing so Niles gives him this plan, and then Maxwell's like, oh, I'm going to go trick Fran into redecorating the kitchen. But then we get this little button on that scene that gave me so much anxiety because we see Niles on his exercise bike. And as soon as Mr. Sheffield leaves the room, Niles reaches down his shirt and pulls out chocolate candy and starts snacking on it. And it instantly made me so anxious. I'm like, no, Niles, that's the worst thing you could do.
Meanwhile, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's an Easter brand Reese's. It was
It
like
was. It was. It was
the
the
color.
eggs.
Yeah. That's what I clocked, and I go, oh, those are the best kinds because the chocolate layer is a little thinner, and I think that the chocolate to peanut butter ratio is better in their Easter than in
I
the regular.
agree. And I also think they put a slightly different peanut butter mix in there because the
Oh,
texture is always a little bit different, but delicious.
yeah. I found some in a very hidden away cabinet recently, and found out Kyle had hidden them from me.
Should our next podcast just be a podcast where we taste every candy and talk about it?
Hey, I know one. Let's do one where it's just a coffee and cake pairing podcast where we just no, we gotta do it. It's for the pod.
All right, sorry. I
But
distracted us. But so Maxwell is on this mission to now trick Fran. It's very funny how the show almost calls itself out of like, well, you could just be a normal person and go ask her to marry you, or you could come up with a cockamamie convoluted plan to stall things. And he's like, that one. which
yes.
which is very
And then,
meta.
yes. And then he goes downstairs and he sees Fran in the kitchen. He's sort of like trying to be manipulative, but it's terrible because he's like, Miss Fine, I just want you to know that like I value our relationship and I'm so glad we're taking it to the next level. He's like, meanwhile, Niles had this, ridiculous suggestion that I should just like distract you with some meaningless projects so that, our relationship wouldn't move as fast, but I don't want that. And he's like,
He really tricked me here. He got me.
yeah. So you think he might be doing the right thing, but then he literally looks around the kitchen and he goes, this place is looking pretty musty, don't you think? And then she's like, I guess. And he's like, I feel like we should maybe redecorate. Maybe if, you had some time. And she goes, me? And he goes, yes, thank you so much for volunteering. Oh, I can't wait to see what you've done with the place. I don't care how long it takes. Weeks, months, maybe like a year and a half. And then he literally like bolts out of the room. So Mr. Sheffield's big plan, it's not to like take anything back like he did in Paris. It's just like, ooh, I will have her really immersed in this, all involved process so that she doesn't really have time to sort of put the heat on me in terms of how fast we move. So they are together.
We don't really get a why. Was my only big like overall note for this episode is it's like, I guess, but like why? Like, because they act very much like boyfriend girlfriend this episode. That was the other like big Elizabeth takeaway from this episode. She's like, wow, they're kissing a lot now, and I was like, yeah, man, they sure are.
Yeah, they really, yeah, no. Especially after where we left them last season, where he was basically like, you don't understand, like, the reason that I'm moving so slow is because, like, you're not a one-night stand, and, like, I'm a gentleman, and I want to do this right. You would think that meant when they finally got together, it would be like, we're getting married, like, as soon as possible. Let's, like, make this official. But instead, we go to this holding pattern. But it's because, as we've said, the writers needed to figure out how to create tension in order, like, some sort of tension between the characters, and it feels manufactured. Like we have no idea why he's slowing things down at this point. But so this sets up the episode that Fran is tasked with redecorating the kitchen. And so then the next scene we have, Fran's back in the kitchen and she's like kind of like looking through decorating catalogs, and Sylvia arrives with a celebratory coffee cake, to sort of like congratulate Fran for having a boyfriend. And yeah, Fran says something kind of sassy, and then Sylvia goes, oh, look at Miss Cocky Comedienne now that she has a boyfriend. Like, calling somebody, ooh, Miss Cocky Comedienne. It was so funny. It was so, and I can't even do it justice. It was so funny the way Sylvia said it.
It was.
But then Fran's like, I don't even have a boyfriend, Mom. Mr. Sheffield's pulling back just like always.
It was done with the same tone as when Sylvia calls her a big shot. It's that same thing of like old Jewish women going, oh, Mr. Big Shot over here, I was going to say there's a funny line in here too, where because Sylvia's friend's like, I don't know though, Mom, like, he like, I don't think he wants to take this super seriously. He told me he wants to redecorate a room. And Sylvia's like, oh, he wants you to redecorate something. Like, that's a good sign. What room? And Fran goes, the one with the refrigerator. And Sylvia goes, "Ooh, the bedroom."
Yes, yes, yes.
Ooh,
Yes.
she's like, "Oh, the bedroom. That's lovely." And Fred's like,
Yeah, yeah.
"What? No."
Yes. Well, because basically, Fran complains that, Mr. Sheffield's pulling his same nonsense. And she, she's totally wise to what he's up to. She's like, he's basically like trying to distract me with this decorating project. But then Sylvia's like, no, no, no. That's actually a very good sign. And it's like leveling up in a relationship because he wants your taste in his home. So congratulations, sweetie. And I just wrote, man, this is like all the dumb stuff people like, if you've ever had conversations with friends when they're trying to like figure out why someone they're dating is doing something, and it's just like, no, they're just not that into you. Like, that's not the case here because we do know Mr. Sheffield loves her and is just like deeply emotionally handicapped. But in general, this would be the kind of thing where someone would be like, oh my God, yeah, no, he like doesn't really answer my text. And like, he sometimes like weirdly disappears for 2 days. But he like wants me to decorate his living room. Like, I think that like, he really cares about me.
Yes, this is absolutely that situation, and Sylvia is the friend stabbing in the dark at like, oh, that's a good thing, and then you got another friend being like, oh, that's a bad thing, and you're like, I don't know if you guys know anything.
Yeah, like trying to like unpack somebody else's motives when it's just so clear, like they're not into you enough. But so Sylvia sort of puts that idea in Fran's head, and so then Fran's kind of like, oh wow, like so I guess I want to do a really good job on this. If like this is kind of more like a relationship thing, a
like
relationship
test. He starts to see it as like a test now.
Yes,
like oh, if I don't nail this, he's gonna think like my style sucks and I don't care. And so Sylvia really gets into Fran's head here. It's so funny how Fran came into this scene very like, I know what he's doing, and like I'm not gonna let this trick me, and then leaves the scene being like hyper focused and obsessed.
Yes, and then also we can't forget that Sylvia steals a spice rack with all the spices on her way out because she goes, "This isn't going to work with your new motif anyway." As then
that becomes a very funny running gag too. Every time we see Sylvia, she's stealing shit from the kitchen.
Yes, and claiming it's because it's not going to go with the new motif.
Yes.
But so the next scene is like a dinner scene, and we're in the dining room, and for once we actually see Niall sitting down eating, and Maggie's actually serving everyone chicken. And we're seeing also the kids for the first time in this season premiere, which is always noteworthy in that like they just grow by leaps and bounds. Like like especially in like the next episode, like Brighton is like he's so much older.
He looks 47. He's like, hey, everybody, it's me, Brighton.
Yeah, he's just gone from like little baby kid to teen to like young man now. It's like very weird. And Gracie's also, much taller. So I don't know. That always is like a little bit of like a whoa at a season premiere of any show with kids for me, or just because you got to like readjust.
We also get one of the most spoiled brat lines that has ever been uttered on this show, which is Niles is being very vague about when he can start working again, and to the point where Mr. Sheffield's like, what's going on here? Like, and Niles is like, oh, it could be a week, it could be 2, who knows? And Maggie just goes, man, one of the reasons I didn't move into a dorm is because we have a butler.
Yes.
Elizabeth and I both went, ew.
Yeah.
Gross.
Also, I would say like, while I guess that works to keep her in the show more, that's like one of the worst things a kid can do, I feel like, is like live at home and miss out on dorm life. Like that's like the whole thing that actually is like the education, I think, of like those 4 years sometimes is like maturing socially.
Agreed. I think it's twofold. Like I do think there's like value in education in like,
for sure,
like, college education, but I do think a lot, like I would say maybe even the majority of kids need that experience of not living at home during college, because otherwise you get thrust into the real world post college and you literally have no skills, like no like keep yourself alive skills.
Yeah, and like just like all the magic that happens when you like make friends on your hallway and like stay up late talking to them, and like then you get invited to the parties and this and that. And it is like You would completely miss out on that if you didn't live in the dorms.
Yes. Agreed.
But anyway, so yeah, we established that Maggie has been picking up some chores, and so is everybody else. And Niles is like claiming it could be a full year until he can work again. And then there was this very funny thing that happened where then Fran enters and she's carrying like all these heavy sort of like fabric swatches that are on like those rolls. And Mr. Sheffield literally goes, "Oh, Miss Fine, you shouldn't be carrying that." But then instead of standing up and offering to do it for her, he goes, "Niles." But then Niles is like out of commission. So then Niles goes, "Margaret." And then Margaret goes, "Brighton." And then he goes, "Gracie." And then Gracie just goes, "Fran." And then by that point, Fran is already on the other side of the room heading into the kitchen with like all of this weight on her back. And she goes, it's fine. Sit. And it was a very mom, like undervalued mom moment. Like I bet you like every mom in America is like, yeah, that's relatable.
Yes, agreed. Everyone just wants to pass the buck, and by the time you get it on passing the buck, mom's just already done it and is like, whatever, thanks for nothing, you jerks.
Yep. And but so then Fran carries all these fabrics like samples into the kitchen where Sylvia is and she's measuring. Yeah, she's come back and she is measuring different items of furniture, clearly being like, I'm going to take all this when they redecorate.
She also, I think it was in the previous scene, or maybe it's this scene, but she does have a beat where she literally asks someone if they can move the fridge to her house. Like she's like,
yes.
Like she's making the assumption that Fran is going to get a whole new refrigerator, which you don't even really need because their fridge is really nice. Like their original, it's not like outdated. It looks like, super modern and fancy. So it's so funny to me and also Sylvia's kitchen we have seen, and it is so small. So it's hilarious. She wants this like double wide fridge moved.
Yeah. She's a true vulture. Oh, I guess we should say I don't think that I think Fran is taking this job seriously, but I don't think she takes it quite as seriously as we were sort of insinuating until this scene. Because so Fran enters the kitchen, Sylvia's in there measuring stuff for herself, and Sylvia's like, Fran, she goes, "Why are you schlepping all this stuff around?" She goes, "I raised you to be a pointer, not a schlepper." Which I thought was so funny. And she goes, "You should call your cousin Sheila. She's a fancy, schmancy decorator in Queens." Or I think she actually said Forest Hills, which is in Queens. And then, or is it Brooklyn? I forgot. But
God.
She's like,
we get it. You're from New York. You know all the places.
Oh, should I? It's the subway, not the metro.
You're like, it's actually the red line, and
I need my coffee. But so then there's this really dark joke though, because at first Fran's like,
the darkest joke.
Yeah, because Fran's like, I don't want to call Sheila mom, and Fran's like, you really should. You need to. This is gonna prove to Mr. Sheffield that you'd make a good wife. And I thought, ooh, that's so regressive. And then Fran's like, oh, wow. So she says something where she's like, you're right. I need to basically be like Martha Stewart. And then Sylvia goes, really? You're using her as your example? She's divorced. And then Fran's like, well, okay, but I guess you are right, because think about it, like, Mr. Sheffield's wife decorated this entire house, right? So that must say something. And then Sylvia's like, yeah, and look where she is now. like basically was she implying that Mr. Sheffield killed her because he was unsatisfied with her wifing?
No, see, I took that to mean that Sylvia interpreted that as God killed her because she didn't do a good enough job decorating. That's what that and where is she today? Because she goes, oh, you want to be like Martha Stewart? Well, where is she today? Divorced. And then she goes, oh, Mr. Sheffield's wife. And she goes, and where is she today? And it just hangs there. And it's like, oh boy, Jesus Christ. And this is all just to get to, okay, I have to call Sheila. Like, because, I'm not going to be able to do this myself. And we know, Sheila's a family. So let me call Sheila, which leads us to the next scene where Fran has a fantastic outfit on. When Sheila comes over, by the way.
Which was the outfit? I forgot.
It was like this dark kind of like tight like suit thing. I don't know how to describe clothes, but it was cool looking. She looked really cool.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Yeah.
Well, so basically, the next scene is Fran and Sylvia are in the living room and the doorbell rings and they go answer it. And it is cousin Sheila, played by Roseanne Barr, who at this time had just wrapped up her long running sitcom, Roseanne. This is pre the Connors. This was pre recent controversy.
This is post Roseanne?
So I looked this up. Roseanne aired from 1988 to May of 1997. And this episode aired right around then in 97, which makes me think she would have been freed from her ABC contract. It would have been relatively easy for her to probably pop over to a CBS show. And the thing about this is Sean and I were talking about this a little earlier, regardless of, the recent, sort of Fox News related Trump shenanigans.
Crazy Nazi Roseanne.
Yeah, which you can you can Google, it's exhausting. But back then, before she went kind of nuts, was very much I would say a feminist pioneer on TV and also a pioneer for including LGBTQ characters, has just regulars on her show. I think several characters in Roseanne came out as gay and they were integral people in the cast.
Yeah.
And they came out on
and Roseanne was a good show. At the time, it was a good show. So this would have been a huge get for the nanny. But all of that said, Roseanne is only good at playing Roseanne.
Yes.
And she's not good at playing Jewish, first of all, which she's trying really hard to do, but it just doesn't, it never lands in this. And honestly, she comes off as it's so funny. Trashy just seeps out of Roseanne. Just trashy. And this character is, I don't think, supposed to be that way. She's supposed to be tacky. She's supposed to be, what I think this character was supposed to be is the tacky Jewish cousin who supposedly has this great style, but is actually gaudy and has no style. But instead, this character comes off as just kind of trashy.
Yes, she was very miscast for this. There's many actresses at the time that could have played the over the top, gaudy, you said, tacky person, almost obviously she's too much Fran, but Janice from Friends could have showed up.
Or even, and we've already had her on the show, but Lainey Kazan is a great, she could have, I know she's already played a relative, but that is more what I think they were describing in describing the character before she shows up, is that kind of she's very much like Sylvia, but she's just too much everything. And instead you get this lady who comes over who's just she's kind of crass and trashy, which is very much what Roseanne was known for at the time. But it doesn't play when you try to overlay, and she's just this Jewish woman from Queens,
Yes. And that's the thing is she's dressed the way Sylvia's dressed, but there's one scene near the end where we see some more of her upper body and she has a huge tattoo. And it's no one in Fran's family would have that, right? They're a different kind of low class.
Yes, exactly.
But so she does have some very funny lines though that she does deliver, and they are funny, but again, she's a little miscast. But so she comes in And, again, she's kind of loud, she's gaudy, but, and we have this great scene where Fran takes Sheila into the kitchen to show her around. And Sheila begins to show her like design scheme for the kitchen, because she's like heard that like the true intent behind this design, redecoration, is to like woo Mr. Sheffield. So her theme is like, quote, aphrodisiac. So she unrolls this wallpaper. It's like cotton candy pink with oysters all over it, because oysters are aphrodisiacs. And then she's also like pointing at things, and she's like,
she also straight up says it's Red Lobster wallpaper. She calls it out.
Yes.
She goes, this is very special wallpaper. Hey, do you recognize it? And Friend's like, what? And she's like, it's from Red Lobster.
Yes. And then she is like, I want to put like antlers. I want to put antlers everywhere because, horns, horny. And then she's like, and lovebirds. And she says all these terrible ideas. But while she is excitedly talking about this, every few sentences, she starts to actually break down and cry, because we also established that she recently broke up with her boyfriend, Mitch. And it was actually one of the funniest lines of the episode to me, where when they first come into the kitchen, Fran's like, oh, and Sheila, I heard about you and Mitch. I'm so sorry. Like, why did he leave you? And Roseanne goes, why do you assume he left me? And then she's like, oh, okay, sorry. Like, why did you leave him? And she goes, because I'm not going to stay with someone who dumped me. Which I literally laughed out loud. It was such a good line. And it actually was delivered in a really great way. But so she's like crying intermittently. And then she's like, and Fran, the worst thing is, we were friends for 4 years. And then we finally got together and we got to second base. And we had established earlier in the show that Fran and Mr. Sheffield had got to second base in the hospital. She's like, we got to second base. And then suddenly he cools everything off. And Fran's like, what? You were friends for 4 years. You got to second base and then he dumped you. And she goes, well, not exactly. First, he had me redecorate a room in his house and then he dumped me. And Fran suddenly gets like this look of horror on her face, where she's clearly convinced that like Mr. Sheffield is pulling all the same stunts. And like this means that she's about to get dumped, which is like kind of absurd, right? Like, but
also,
I mean,
didn't we already establish? I was so confused by this. Did they not have sex in France?
No. They never had sex. The only time
implication was that they like spent a night together in France and then come back from that. And
no, don't you remember?
They have never actually had sex. I don't know why in my mind I thought they like fooled around.
No. So the thing is, in France, they have this really great night together, and he actually says like, I'm here in Paris with a beautiful woman. Let's go take advantage of it. And then we literally quick cut to them on a plane going home, because he has again had cold feet. And she's like, well, I guess you're right. It was better that we race home to the children. And then there's like the plane almost goes down, and that's when he says, I love you.
Right.
But
I guess they don't ever like do it.
Well, there is that one episode a few seasons back where they are drunk and like fall into bed. She's drunk and falls into bed, and they wake up in each other's arms, and they're not sure what happened. And they are at the end like, well, we obviously didn't do it. And she's like, because my ears itch after. And he was like, and I always like sing this one particular song after. And then as they go their separate ways, she like itches her ear and he's humming the song. So it's a very ambiguous, but like they weren't even like conscious for it if it happened. But basically, we established that Sheila had a very similar like relationship trajectory as it seems that Fran and Mr. Sheffield had. So Fran kind of goes from 0 to 60 in this scene, and she's literally like, oh my God, Sheila, I'm confident that's what's going to happen to me. And she's like, Mr. Sheffield did this, and this, just like Mitch, I'm about to get dumped. So much so that Fran takes his favorite teapot and smashes it on the floor and goes, oops. And then Sheila goes, Fran, how could you do that when this designer vase is so much more expensive? And then she picks up another vase and smashes it. And then Yetta comes in, excitedly waving her ring finger around, saying that she's engaged, but she has 2 rings because the 89-year-old who proposed to her forgot that he got her the first. And then this was a really dirty joke. She then wanders out of the room. She wanders out of the room, and then Fran goes, oh, what does she have that we don't? And then Sheila goes, removable teeth. I'm like, damn. But, yes, we've established that Fran is like convinced she's getting dumped and she hates men, and so does Sheila. And then we have this quick scene where Brighton is in Niles' room helping him do sit-ups, and then he basically bails when it gets a little too inconvenient and goes to complain to his dad. And Mr. Sheffield's like, son, we need to show compassion. Like, this man just had a heart attack. And then Gracie walks by and is like, hey, daddy. And then Mr. Sheffield literally screams, why did you just say that? Now he knows I'm out here.
Also, one of Brighton's complaints about not wanting to help Niles is that Niles is wearing really short exercise shorts, and Brighton is very upset because he can see his testicles.
Yes.
Which I thought was so funny. He's like, Dad, he's wearing really, really short shorts, and every time he lays down, I can like see stuff.
Yes. I
so
know.
funny. He sees Niles' old balls.
Oh God, you're sad.
That got me so much. I don't know why that one just really delighted me.
So gross. So pathetic. But then the next scene, Fran's now in the like partially redone living room, and it's hideous. Yeah, sorry, kitchen. It's hideous. There's clamshell wallpaper. There's antlers. There's lovebirds. Like,
they have
and
this
Fran's
table that is like a glass top table, and then the bottom part of the table is just hundreds of antlers intertwined. It's so ugly. It looks like, you know what it looked? It reminded me of Gaston's bar in Beauty and the Beast cartoon, where they like pull back, and he's like, I have antlers on everything, and it's just like antlers. That's what it reminded me of.
And then Fran is basically unloading all her anxieties on Val, and she's like, he's not going to dump you. You and Sheila don't lead parallel lives, Fran. And then there's a beat, and she goes, does Sheila still have that stupid best friend? And then Fran has this look of horror on her face, like, oh my God, we are leading parallel lives. But then Val looks around the room and she goes, meanwhile, this kitchen is looking great, but where's the aphrodisiac effect? At which point Cece walks in and she sort of like takes it all in, because it's just like sort of visual, just visual like vomit, right? Yeah. But then this sexy saxophone music starts to play, and you're like, almost like something's like taken, like it's affecting her. And then Niles walks in, like on his way to the gym, and she looks him up and down, and she just goes, huh, that workout routine is paying off big time, mister. Like she just like unabashedly is like, hubba, you're looking good. Yeah. And then he sort of at first looks confused that she would say that, but then he looks around at like the decor, and then the saxophone music plays again, and he goes, pick you up at 8, wear something. And then she goes, Velcro. And he like kisses at her and walks out. So it's just like, we've just established that this hideous decor like actually does work.
Yeah, but only on dum-dums. I think that's the bit, right? It's like, of course it only works on these two idiots. It just makes them horny.
It was a very silly beat, though. It did make me laugh.
It was cute.
And then the phone rings, and it is Sheila. And she's basically like, Fran, guess what? I got back together with Mitch. And Fran's face like lights up, because in her mind, she's like, we lead parallel lives. So like, this means I'm not going to like be dumped by Mr. Sheffield. And then,
which we should again clarify, was never on the table.
Yes, it was all in
Fran's. This is all in Fran's mind. He was never going to break up with her. He just wanted to stall.
Yes, I think like maybe, even though this is like an incredibly absurd like version of this, like a metaphor might be like, let's say like you just moved in with like your partner or whatever, and someone else, like a girlfriend's like, oh, well, that's when like Jerry dumped, that's when we started having problems, and that's when he dumped me. And then you get it in your head, and you're like, or like, oh my God, I need to like not wear sweatpants around the house. I need to always look good. Like if I don't do that, like I'm going to have that trajectory. So it's like, I think those anxieties are real. Where like, you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that thing that other people do, because that's when they say like problems start. So like this like kind of like mirrors certain real world problems, but this was just so absurd and heightened.
It's so silly. Yeah.
So Sheila has called, and she's like, we're back together. And so Fran's really happy. But then Sheila goes, and guess what? It turns out the only reason he dumped me is he says that my decor makes him nauseous. So it was actually her redecorating
Yes.
the room in his house that led to the breakup. So then Fran looks around this like hideous room and starts to panic. And like this guy, like a mover comes in with more chairs. And she's like, out, get out, take it all back. And we then cut to a few days later. And Fran is sitting in what is now a brand new kitchen, completely like devoid of Sheila's influence, which I have to say I didn't love. Even though it's supposed to be nice, I was like,
The
this
new
is
kitchen set? You weren't into it?
No, I thought it was like completely like discordant with the rest of the house.
Agreed. I like the set as its own thing, and obviously they got season 5 money and we're like, let's redo one of these sets because we spend a lot of time in them and we always see the same room. But I agree. It felt like a remodel, but like a remodel for a different house. Because like you think about what the rest of that house looks like, and then you walk into this very suddenly very colorful kitchen, and it feels like another home, not like, I don't know. I mean,
yeah, it's a lot of like corals and rouges and a little more, like, much more modern.
And the house itself is just like very white and like sterile kind of. I mean, maybe that's the point, is like this is what like I think what they were going for is the idea of like, well, this is the color that this is like the physical interpretation of the color that Fran brings to their lives. And so like, this is the first room she's touched, but like theoretically, like this is like her whole house would be like colorful and slightly more vibrant and slightly more alive than like the sort of, you know, sterile environment, like the sterile sort of rich environment that like Mr. Sheffield has always kind of preferred.
I love that. I love that interpretation. I think that's spot on, probably.
I think that's why it is the way it is and it feels so discordant, but I think that's kind of by design. Yeah. You know, like this kitchen does feel very Fran. It does feel like if you cut to, Fran's, you know, if she didn't live with them and you cut to Fran's apartment, and this was the kitchen, I would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. So I kind of see what they were trying to do, and maybe it'll make more sense as the season goes on if they like renovate other rooms or whatever.
Yeah, but, it was very warm and very loud, so that makes a lot of sense. And then Mr. Sheffield comes downstairs, and I guess I should say that Fran and Sylvia are in the kitchen, and Sylvia's there a lot these days. But Mr. Sheffield then comes downstairs and he's like, Miss Fine, you know, this, like, I love what you did with this room. The kitchen's like officially my favorite room of the house. And then he looks at her and he goes, I should do you in the dining room next. And he goes, I mean, I should have you do the dining room next. And she kind of smiles flirtatiously. And Sylvia like picks up her coffee mug and like tiptoes out to give them some alone time. And they're like just about to kiss. And Sylvia comes back in and goes, to take a plate of cake, because she goes, I still have half a cup of coffee left. And I just went, that is so relatable that like she can't drink this coffee without her cake, because it's just like, what's the point?
What's the point? Yeah.
But you gotta have that little sweet, you gotta have the sweet with the bitter, or it's just, it doesn't work. And then she like tiptoes out again, and then you know, Fran's response to the whole like, you know, maybe you should decorate the dining room is, ooh, are you sure? Like, want to take it to like even the next level? Like, kind of the joke being that like with every room, it's like we're getting more serious. Yes. And then when they're about to kiss one more time, Sylvia walks back in, now with tons of those fabric swatches that Fran had bought. And she goes, you're not going to need these with the new motif. And she's like out the door with more stuff. And it was just like, that was the episode. And it's, you know, again, when I take a step back from this episode, while the actual events that happened literally were very absurd, and I don't think anyone would actually be like, oh my gosh, like he's going to dump me if I don't do a good job decorating. Again, I think there's a lot of new relationship anxiety and a lot of people being like, I'm going to do this right. I'm not going to like, I've heard that, sometimes people are too clingy, so I'm not going to do that, you know? And, you know, so-and-so told me that this is really like when the beginning of the end, so I'm going to avoid that. And like, everyone kind of does those slightly like, I would say like anxious things, right?
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
think that's fair. But this was a very solid first episode back as far as season premieres go. I liked it. I mean, I thought it was a good episode. You know, Roseanne was the weakest link here, but she even managed to get some really good lines in. And like, we got a lot of the rest of the cast this episode, which I was really happy about. Like, the kids were there. Cece was there. Niles was there. Sylvia. We even got Yetta. Like, it was a good episode. I liked it overall.
and then, well, I guess like you said, I would like to know why Mr. Sheffield is slowing it down, but it almost seems like he's just being a little bit like stereotypically male at this point, which is just like, just let's get married in like a year. But like, there's no real point to any of it.
There's no real point. No, and maybe that'll get further defined in the season, but having seen episode 2, I don't know. Maybe they're just going to go with, he just is nervous to get remarried,
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that was an episode.
Yeah, he'd rather just spend hundreds of thousands of dollars redecorating the house than a little bit on a wedding.
Yes.
Well,
And
that was
speaking of which, we got a new kitchen set. It's a new season. You know what that means, Toria?
I bet I do.
That's right. It's time for segments with an all new segments theme. And now, segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
To say we can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Sean and Toria.
Wow. Okay, listeners.
I did it.
I was about to say, tell us what you think, but only tell us if you like it, because it takes Sean a lot of time to make those.
Sean is fragile. No, honestly, tell us what you think. If you hate it, we'll just revert to one of the old ones. I don't throw them away. So
Yeah. Maybe we could be like, do you want to go to the OG for a while?
Well, that's what I was going to do for the final season. I was going to revert us back to the original thing. I was going to bring everything back to where it started.
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. That was our original theme, right?
Yeah, the Simpsons thing.
Yeah. Well,
All right, so
also,
lines and
favorite
moments,
lines. Yeah. I love the, ooh, Miss Cocky Comedian. And I loved when Sylvia goes, I raised you to be a pointer, not a schlepper. I realized I said all my favorite lines. And then I loved when cousin Sheila was like, well, I could have left him. And then she's like, but I wasn't going to stay with someone who dumped me. It's just...
there was a couple that I said a lot of my favorites too. I think there's only 2 that we didn't get. One of them is when Sheila is describing, like, you know, oh, he had me redo the kitchen and he had me do all this stuff for him. And then I forget the lead in, but Sheila basically goes, you know, and he wanted me to get all this work done to my body and, like, you know, to really change who I was. And then he broke up with me. And then Fran goes, well, it's a good thing you didn't get all that work done. And Sheila clearly acts offended, like, yo, I did get that work done. And then there's this long pause. And then Fran goes, by a quack.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Which I just thought was, it's a good thing you didn't get all the work done by a quack. Like, it's such a good, like, catch, you know, saving yourself. I think it's in that same scene. There's a very funny line where Fran, you know, Sheila is describing, like, you know, oh, we dated for 4 years and I pushed him to, like, you know, make it more serious. And Fran is trying to sort of say, like, well, we're not the same. Like, and then Fran goes, as God is my witness, I have never pushed Mr. Sheffield. And as she says it, she looks up at the sky and, like, shrinks back, like, oh no, I'm going to get struck dead because I just said God is my witness.
Yeah. She, like, knows it's a lie.
Knows it's a lie. I loved that. I thought that was very funny. And I think that was, you know, I think we called out I ravaged her. He was like a gentle little lamb, really got me. And the refrigerator in the bedroom, Sylvia line also.
Yeah. And I did love the silliness of the decorating actually working on Niles and Cece.
Yeah, me too. Good payoff.
And in terms of Yiddish, we got schlep, which, you know, schlepper versus pointer. And for nanny trivia, okay, so we actually haven't talked about it in this episode yet, but did you notice that Lauren Lane is clearly pregnant, right?
Oh, really?
Definitely, yeah. You can
Oh.
tell like they are kind of masking a pregnancy, which makes
Oh, that's
sense because
interesting.
yeah, I'm pretty, yeah, this is the season where both she and Val will end up masking pregnancies.
Oh wow. No, I just I literally went, "Oh, she got a little fat between seasons. That's okay."
It's like Romeo and Michelle. It's like, at least we didn't get fat. And it's like, we're pregnant, you moron.
Yeah, that's literally yes.
Yeah, no. They're definitely, so with Lauren Lane, they are doing the thing where they, have big blazers and baggier clothes. And apparently it's really interesting. They, in a lot of sitcoms, they kind of try to hide the stomach area, like with pillows, and they do all this creative stuff. And apparently I've read that they just like didn't even try. They were just like, whatever, we're just going to like ignore the elephant. Well, that's a poor choice of words. I was gonna say ignore the elephant. We're like, we're just kind of gonna like operate as if she's not pregnant, but we're not gonna like obsess about hiding it.
Okay.
But so it made me kind of just do a little more Lauren Lane deep dive, which we've done in the past, but I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I wonder what she's up to, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So,
she deserves it.
yeah, she's so good. And she's just getting funnier and funnier. The way she said, it's paying off big time, mister. But so I saw that she appeared on Fran Drescher's talk show. Because Fran Drescher had one, about 10 years or more after The Nanny ended, and she came on as a guest, and Fran was talking to her, and Fran brought up, she was like, so, after the Nanny ended, you had been on this big sitcom, and then you just kind of decided to pack it up and move to Austin, to Texas, from, Austin, Texas, where you're from. Like, can you explain a little why you made that move? And Lauren Lane was like, and by the way, I should say, like, this isn't really trivia as much as just like interesting background about like actors that we love. But Lauren Lane was like, I was 40 years old when the show ended, and I had a 4-year-old, and I had to really decide, like, if I wanted to basically like stick it out in Hollywood as a 40-year-old actress and like take time away from raising my kid, like, but because it's like, yeah. And she was like, and so I'm from Texas. And so I moved back to Austin, like, to really kind of focus more on like work-life balance. And like, I think she didn't say it explicitly, but you almost get the sense that maybe she was like, yeah, like it's only going to get like more impossible from here on out. And I already had this like great experience. So like, now let me focus on my kid. Right. And so she goes back to Austin, and she eventually started teaching, like, at the university, and like, is on faculty in like the dramatic arts program. And Fran was like, well, I remember like my teacher, one of my first acting teachers in high school said that I'd never get work because of my voice. And they both kind of laughed. And Lauren Lane was like, oh, I was basically told the same thing. Like, I don't know if it was specifically because of her voice, because she does have this like very like actory, theatrical voice, like in real life.
Yes.
But she was like, I was basically told the same thing, like I wouldn't make it for XYZ reason. And she's like, so my philosophy as an acting teacher is, I'm super nurturing. Like, it's not my job to tell people like, you're never going to make it. She's like, because the reality is like, you never know. Like, both of us were working actors, and we were told we wouldn't make it for some random reason. And she's like, and you never know, like, some people have like really obvious gifts right away, and some people like it takes nurturing to unlock. So like, I would so much rather be like really supportive, because I feel like that's when people actually like feel safe enough to sort of like really grow and explore in these environments. Because it is true. There are some teachers who, like, especially in the dramatic arts, and like who are like, next, nope, like,
Right.
not gonna. And it's like, it sounds like a cliche, but it is. I think it might actually be a technique that they're using to try to like elevate their students' performances, and like, think they're getting something, by putting their students through pain. And it like is a technique, but she was basically like, no, like, that's super not the way that I choose to teach acting. And then she also said that she had recently done a play with Daniel Davies in Texas, and it had been like 11 years since The Nanny.
So Fran or the Cece or whomever?
Yeah. You go first.
Okay, Niles. I have I feel like Niles is struggle with staying healthy is very relatable to me. And I also think that Niall's like desire to drag out his recovery as much as possible to just really
Yes.
milk it was also very relatable to me. More so than like any of the will they won't they stuff, or like I never really had relationships like Fran and Mr. Sheffield have. Like it was, either I was into a girl and she liked me back, or I was into a girl and she didn't like me back. And that was sort of it. I never like did this dance of like, we both like each other, but neither one of us can say it. Da-da-da. So that stuff is kind of hard for me to relate to sometimes. What about you?
I agree for similar reasons. I felt like the Niles, but I also felt like the Niles in that I have a terrible trait of it's so manipulative. It's like if I'm a little sick or something and then someone's like, oh, like, can you help me take out the trash? I'm like, oh, but I'm still kind of sick. But then if someone was like, oh, do you want to come to this movie? I'm like, oh, awesome. And can like jump up and like go do it. Like it's very dependent on like, I think it's also psychosomatic. Like I will feel sicker if someone is making me do something I don't really want to do. But if then someone is suggesting something fun, I'm suddenly like, I'm not that sick. I'm fine. No, let's go to that thing.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
And that was an episode, guys. We're as always so thrilled that everyone is sticking along with us on this journey. We are even building as we go, and new people seem to kind of find this podcast all the time, which is super cool. So if you're brand new, welcome. If you're an old head, welcome back. You can find us on social media at Oh Mr. Chef Pod on Instagram and Twitter. You can also email us, which no one has ever done still to this day, at ohmrsheffieldpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, let us know your thoughts. Tell us what you think for the season, if you're excited for what's coming up. And we will be back next week with another episode.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Goodbye.
The Flashing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.